Good afternoon, Westwood, and welcome. Episode 2 of our podcast. Evan Cardimino, Morgan Donahue. Evan, we have a name?
We do have a name. With a final score of 12-5, the winner of our vote for our name for our podcast is the Wolverine Report. So welcome to the Wolverine Report. Morgan, how are you?
Doing good. How about yourself?
I am doing pretty good.
And Evan, we have ourselves a guest.
We do have a guest today.
Absolutely. A man who needs no introduction. Someone who has certainly been solidifying their legacy in Westwood sports as a coach. Head coach of your Westwood Boys Lacrosse program, head coach Todd Zahurak. Todd, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Hey guys, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Todd, I want to just jump right in, about your history with the game, as a player, and ultimately, how you became a coach. Who introduced you to the game of lacrosse? Where did you end up playing, and ultimately, how did you become a coach, and what brought you to Westwood?
Sure. Originally, I'm from upstate New York. So I went to two different high schools. When I first started in ninth grade, I was a track guy because we didn't have lacrosse at my high school. So I did that for a couple of years. And then my junior year transitioned over to a school that had lacrosse, and it looked a whole lot more fun than, running straight and turning left. So I jumped at that opportunity to go play lacrosse and as they say, the rest was history. I fell in love with it. I went to SUNY Oswego, which is north of Syracuse. Played my 4 years there for a coach named Dan Whitmer, who really let me kind of come into my own as a lacrosse player. And just interacting with him and the game itself, knew I wanted to be a part of it. And once I finished playing, then the next logical step was to start coaching. So as soon as I graduated, I started coaching, and I've been doing that ever since.
Awesome. Great programs in the upstate, SUNY, Plattsburgh and, Oswego, and that's great that, your coach had such a great influence you in college. It's important,
Oh, absolutely. Like you mentioned a little bit earlier, it really became like a father figure to me and really let me grow as a young man.
Yeah. And, it actually kind of good transition into my next question is, when you decided to become a coach and, even throughout your coaching career, who would you say has been the biggest influence to you as a coach? Is Dan one of those? And if there's additional, who have been most influential on you in your coaching career?
Sure. As a player, Dan Whitmer certainly had the most influence. I played for him for the longest amount of time.
Yeah.
He's just a great guy. He's still involved with the game. I still talk to him at least monthly about all kinds of things, not just lacrosse, but across the board. Yeah. My high school coach was a guy named Russ Ferris. Yeah. He's an upstate New York legend. So having the opportunity to play for him was just tremendous. And then when I first moved out to Massachusetts, I was working for a guy named Wayne Puglisi out of Andover. Yeah. And he had a massive influence on me as well, just making sure that I knew that it was fun, that look, we're playing lacrosse. This isn't life and death. But let's take it seriously. Yes. And so having the opportunity to interact with him was phenomenal as well.
Well, we're on the topic of influential people in your life. You've coached for quite a long time. You've had plenty of players come through. So are there any players that you've coached that have been a big influence on you?
Absolutely. I don't think that you can get out of this without having the kids influence you in a tremendous way. So in Westwood, probably the guy that has the most influence on me was a young man named Casey McQuillan. He played for me, had to be about 10 years ago. Just a phenomenal individual, an outstanding player, just a brilliant young man. And just kind of having the opportunity to learn from him and see what made him tick really impacted the way that I've coached in the future.
And you still keep in touch with Casey to this day?
Absolutely. Yep.
Great.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Switching topics a little bit. We, Morgan and I covered a lot of your games this season. We covered quite a few. Are there any games that really stuck out to you and games that were your favorite this year?
Well, the Derryfield game, that was a big one. We hadn't beaten those guys before. I'm friendly with their coach, so just not having beaten him kind of stuck with me a little bit. So that was a nice one to get. It's always nice to beat Dover because they've been such a strong program for such a long time, and we don't have many wins over them. So being able to pick that up was fantastic. And then I think that our best game of the season, unfortunately, was a loss, but it was our game at Medfield. Yeah. And I think we were able to see the growth of our team from the first time we played Medfield this year, where we kind of got our teeth kicked in a little bit, to really kind of hang with those guys. And I felt we had a chance. You get down to the last 5 minutes and we're in the game, and Unfortunately, didn't bounce our way this time, but we were in the game. So
Yeah.
I think those are probably my favorites.
Coach, definitely close. I was at that game and it was fantastic. And I remember that Liam Williams goal at the end. It was like from 20 yards out and found the back of the net, and definitely put a scare on Medfield. I would also say in that first game, Medfield got off to a hot start and Westwood was a cold game. But Westwood, like in the second half, I believe they won the second half. Medfield just got off to this torrid pace, so it was really good to see, Westwood coming back into the game. Ultimately it was a loss, and Medfield did win handily, but certainly saw stuff from them. Pollock, everyone was still competing to the very end. And I even look back on last year too. Last year, the last game versus Medfield, winner was going to take all.
Yep.
So that's how close Westwood is. You're a lot closer to the team. You're a lot closer to the league. How close is Westwood to its next TVL championship?
I was talking to a couple of my returning players this year about that, and I believe that we're right there.
Absolutely.
I think that we're at the point where if you took the jerseys off and mixed them up at the beginning of the game, you wouldn't be able to decide who's Westwood and who's Medfield. It's kind of overcoming that mental hurdle of you're not just playing Medfield, you're playing the name across the shirt, and once we get over that, I think it's going to be a 50-50 game every year.
Yeah, and I thought what was most impressive, and it was really a microcosm of this year and the defense this year, was Medfield's face-off guy is clearly the best, one of the best in the state.
Yeah, he's outrageous.
Unbelievable, and he's going up against Timmy Malloy, who's an unbelievable face-off person himself, and Westwood was able to get the ball on the ground to get to stay in the game and keep it close by getting these turnovers. And when we look at last year, you lost some big pieces on defense. McManus, Williamson, Robertson, who was rotating in, and even Don Varneren, who he's a long stick midi, but how many times is he intercepting passes from behind the net? Big defensive presence. And then you bring in Harvey, who was playing last year, but this year he really completely solidified himself. Ryan Hughes, unbelievable season. And then you have Jaden Pollock come in, completely new to the program. Replacing, Woodward and Solomon, who played terrific last year. All those questions. And then to see how they played in the biggest games of the season, like in Medfield, was remarkable. How impressed were you with them and their leadership? Ryan Williams as well, unbelievable. How impressed were you with just how they stepped up this year and really ultimately became a huge strength for you?
Yeah, it was extraordinary to watch those guys. I think a lot of the credit has to go to Jim Riley, who's my defensive coach. It's his second year with us. Last year he was our JV guy, and this year he came up and it was our defensive coordinator. I thought he did a great job with him. Yeah. Coming into the season, the defense really was a huge question mark for us. We weren't sure what we were going to have, and starting from the back with Jaden coming in. Going into the season, I had said to several people that I need a goalie that's not going to lose games for us. I don't need him to win anything, but as long as my goalie doesn't lose, we're going to be all right. Lose games for us, we're going to be all right. And he did that in spades. He exceeded every expectation that I had for him, both in his shot stopping and his outlet clearing ability was phenomenal.
Unbelievable.
Way better than I anticipated coming in. So, goalie went from being a perceived weakness to a strength for us. And then our close defense, Harvey came in as the leader of the group. He knew that he was going to step into that role. He did a great job of doing that, which then in turn allowed somebody like Ryan Hughes to kind of grow into their role. And I was teasing him earlier. We have a great history of having senior defensemen who have had very little impact on the program previously come in and have phenomenal senior years. And when I think back that the players have done that, I can rip off 8-10 kids that have done that as a senior. And it's really been fun to watch. And it was Hughesy's turn to step in and do that this year. And then Ryan Williams on the other side, just as a sophomore, he throws his body around. He's always involved in the play. He's a very smart player. Understands the defense and what we're trying to do. And by the end of the season, they understood each other's strengths and weaknesses and could play to that. So that group just showed phenomenal growth over the season.
Yeah. And it's an interesting dynamic too amongst the Williams brothers. They're twins. I was a twin. And a lot of times you don't really feel like you have that independence. You're known as the twins. And I like how one is a defense, plays defense, the other plays midfield. But interesting to just hear your feedback. Do they have their independence because of being different players on the team and kind of having different styles and all that? Or, are they still seen as twins, because...
I really think that they are seen as two individuals.
Good.
Because of their different positions. They don't overlap a lot in any of the drills that we do, any of the, even when they're on the field together, they don't tend to overlap a lot. So, we really don't see them as twins. Of course we know it, and, but they're just, as far as we're concerned, they're just brothers, and we've had plenty of families and brothers that have come through. While we were talking about the defense, I think we got to mention Ryan Gaffney.
Yes.
He came in, to fill Donnie's shoes, and you're replacing an All-American, somebody that was just an extraordinary player. Coming into the season, Ryan Gaffney was going to be one of our short stick offensive middies. Yeah. And as the season progressed, it was at one point I handed him a stick and it's like, hey, I need you to try this, and it took him a minute. But once he decided that he was all in for this, he came out of nowhere and was Tri-Valley All-Star. Yeah. Really had a huge impact on the success of our season, and I can't emphasize enough how selfless that was for him to put away his goals of hey, he was going to be the guy that was going to score the overtime game winner against Medfield to win the league. I don't want you to shoot, and I need you to do a completely different role. So he did a great job this year as a captain, as a leader of our team.
Yeah, you mentioned that on the spring sports breakdown. What a sacrifice. What a leader.
Yep.
He scored about, estimation, 20, 25 goals last year. He was a goal scorer.
He was.
And he's a big body. He'd take it to the net. And he was a fun player to watch. And to make that sacrifice and to turn in the player he did, to have that in the defensive zone on a man down, but also on the face-off on the wing, that big frame, and he's scoring goals too. You know, it looked like Don when he's getting passes in front of the net and he's just throwing it on net and scoring goals. But, what does it mean to have a leader like that, that, puts the team first, and also setting that example for the underclassmen too? Because, when you're in your offense, there's a lot of different components that make Westwood's offensive strength, So like, what did it mean to you having that type of leadership, set by Ryan?
Yeah, that was great. You talk about playing for the name on the front of your shirt, not the name on the back of your shirt, especially at the high school level. And as strong as our program has become, we're not super deep yet. Yeah. So we do need players to kind of do what's right for the team. Yeah. And in Gaff's situation, it was dramatically different than anybody had expected. And like I said, it took him a minute to kind of accept that. And I had a conversation with him, and I was like, hey, what are we doing here? We got to make some decisions. And he said, Z, I'm all in. He goes, I just needed a minute to wrap my head around it. And as soon as he said that, he was great. He put his green practice jersey on and played defense, and so it was great to be able to see that. And then for the younger guys to be able to see that, when one of your senior captains and returning all-star players is willing to do that, when it's your turn and you're asked to play something a little bit out of position, how you can't say no. It really kind of sets the tone for us. So it was really great to see that.
You mentioned Ryan Gaffney was a selfless player, and he's one of your captains this year. What are some of the qualities that you're looking for when you're going through each year and finding new captains? Like, what are some things that you want your team captains to have quality-wise?
Well, I don't pick the captains. I leave that up to the players. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe that leaders lead, and whether you are named a captain or you're just a player that's a leader, that's going to happen. So I really think that the team personality is brought up through the captains, and that's how those guys are selected by their peers. You're voting for people that are like you, and that's really how I think that the captains are representative of the team.
You mentioned Ryan Gaffney, his leadership sacrifice. I also want to bring up a guy like Ryan Pizzuto, a guy who could certainly put a lot of goals in the back of the net, but he seemed to have a defensive focus as well. And I can't remember a player who could single-handedly break the ball out the way he does, and what an asset it is to have Pollock save. Pizzuto goes right to the crease to find him, catches it, and then he looks like Barry Sanders, getting it across the 50 and then setting up your offense. How much of an asset is it to have a guy like him? And, we even called a couple games where not only did he catch that pass from Pollock, he went down the full length and scored.
Yep.
But how much of an asset is it to have, a player like that? You can't teach speed.
Nope.
It's something that's gifted.
Yeah, you can't teach speed, and I don't even think you can teach open field awareness. It's one of those things, you either have it or you don't. Yeah. He's such a phenomenal safety blanket. We set up our clear, so Jaden makes the save, and everybody has their spot to go to. And if you end up in the, oh my God, I don't know what to do, well, throw it to Ryan, and that's great. And you can't. Like you said, you can't teach that. You can't just make somebody fast and understand what they're trying to do there. Yeah. And he was naturally good at that. He's a phenomenal athlete. You would see him in practice, and he would be off on the side. He'd be doing a backflip, and like who can do that stuff with full pads on? Yeah. So having that as like I said, as a safety blanket was just great for us this year. The last couple of years. Absolutely.
One thing I want to mention is, and we noticed this over the last couple of years, is you do a terrific job of rotating players in, particularly midfielders. They're the ones running the full field and having fresh legs out there. A lot of them this year were underclassmen. You had a bunch of freshmen you played.
Yep.
Did you anticipate the talent the talent of the freshmen coming in, of what they were going to be? Could you see it early on in the season, and ultimately, how did they end up earning playing time from you?
Sure. I'm a firm believer that if you're good enough, you're going to play.
Yep.
And I'm not going to carry a freshman and have him sit on the varsity bench when they could be playing JV and getting those valuable reps. We intentionally keep our JV team on the small side, so everybody has to play. Yep. So they do get a lot of those reps. But through the first couple of weeks of the season, when we're evaluating players and we saw the 4 freshmen that we ended up taking, they just stood out. Yeah. They were too good to play on JV. We knew that they were going to be knocking on the door for playing time in varsity, and then it just kind of becomes incumbent on the coaching staff to get those guys in and get them valuable time, not just garbage time at the end of a game, but minutes when it matters. Mm-hmm. And the 2 guys we had at midfield were great. They both started out as defensive middies because you can kind of cover their mistakes a little bit, and then transition them over to playing a little more offense. Yeah. We had the long stick midi there that was backing up Gaffney, and he was great. He was a little undersized, which was kind of on the only knock on him.
Yeah.
So having Gaffney come in and kind of show him how to do it and what to do really worked out well. And then our attackman by the end of the season was one of our top players, and I'm really excited for him for the next couple of years.
Oh gosh, I mean, you are losing some great leadership. You're losing some talent, but you have a tremendous group coming back next year.
Yeah.
On all areas of the field, and there's certainly some opportunities for, players to come in and fit certain spots, whatnot, but also the rotation. You've shown that, players that are rotating are scoring a lot of goals, and are providing, impactful moments and plays in the game. How excited are you for the talent that you have coming back? And, when I look at guys like Fredrickson, Roycroft, the ceiling is already so high. Is there even a higher ceiling for what their capabilities are to do out in that field? I mean, they're doing amazing things. When I looked at some of the stats, 35, 40 goals in a season. Is there a higher ceiling than that?
Is that your way of saying don't screw it up, coach?
No, it's just I'm just so impressed with their play. Like, how do you repeat that?
Yeah, those guys, I don't have to do anything with those guys. They're total lax rats. Yeah. They love the game. They want to be around it. And if you talk to any of them, all they talk about is winning. Yeah. So I just joke, don't screw it up, coach. But it really is that. It's my job to put these guys in the best positions to be successful. And figuring out how to distribute the ball. If we have to make sure that everybody gets their touches, that everybody gets the shots they want, and making sure that everything flows, and that's incumbent on myself to make sure that happens.
Mm-hmm. And you were mentioning notable games. You mentioned the Derryfield game. Unfortunately, I was not at that game, but I was still tied to Westwood Lacrosse. I was actually at Richmond, University of Richmond, watching my niece Lil Hancock take on Sarah Roycroft.
Yep.
So, disappointed to miss that game because I heard it was an amazing game. But games I saw, I was at that Medfield, the second Medfield game in Medfield. Amazing game, back and forth. The Chowder Cup, that win over Norwell, a defending state champion Norwell team, was top game in my opinion as well. Westwood was down 2 goals late, found a way to get back in, also went up 2 goals, and they closed that game out.
That was you mentioned my team is young, and that was a huge win early in the season for us, just to give us confidence that we can play with some of the better teams in the state. So that was important for us to get that one. Unfortunately, the rest of the week didn't go as well as we expected, but I think that was sort of incumbent on being young. We didn't understand how to stack games, and we didn't know what it meant, but we knew we could win in a big game. So that was a good one for us.
You mentioned playing Norwell, and that's a non-league opponent, and some of your non-league opponents are some of the top in the state. So what's sort of your philosophy in terms of picking your non-league opponents, and what are some of the things you look for, like when you're picking your non-league opponent, like that? Is there a specific reason you choose those really tough opponents instead of some easy wins?
Well, I think that the Tri-Valley League is so polar. We have some really good teams in the league. We have some really bad teams in the league. So it's kind of trying to find that balance, and then mixing up difficult games with not beating the heck out of my guys. The Chowder Cup is tough because it's 3 games in 5 days. By the end of that week, we're exhausted. Yeah. And then so coming back into league play after that, we have to look to see, who's coming up, because if we have, Medfield and Hopkinton right after the Chowder Cup, maybe that's not one I want because of the way that the schedule breaks out. I try to find teams that are a little bit better than us is really what I'm looking for in the out of league schedule. I think that's the best way to get better. I don't have a strong interest in going to play like BC High because they're so much better than really kind of, that league is kind of outrageous. So I don't really want to go play those guys, but I want to find teams that are, the next step above us, kind of gives us something to strive for. So I've been happy with our out of league schedule the last couple of years. I think this coming year, we're going to look to try to pick up Walpole. Nice. I think that's a super close game for us. It's easy. It will be a very competitive game. So
will there be some bets on the line with your Walpole presence? Are there any friendly wagers? Have to wear a Walpole shirt.
I'm sure there'll be something along those lines.
I mean, you did play. You played Catholic Memorial.
Yep.
Non-league games. Canton, always a tough team. The Hockomock League's very tough. Sharon, Franklin. Some of the top teams in the state. Norwell. And the thing I look at these D3 teams. They could be in the top 10 for Division I. Yeah. Medfield could easily be slated in the top 5 for Division I.
Yep.
And I give you credit. You're not scared. And you're obviously looking at these games. You want to make your team better. You want them more battle tested for the big games, right. The playoffs. Things right. like that. Question I have for you is, in your professional life, you're a guidance counselor, high school guidance counselor, and you're helping kids make some of the most important decisions of their life. You're trying to set them up for success for their future, right? And then coaching, there's a lot of microcosms, and examples in the coaching side of things of, plays, losses, wins, that are also somewhat impactful on people's lives and having a perspective on those things. How much does your professional life blend into your coaching life, to use examples for these kids to get them ready for life?
I think there's a tremendous amount of overlap.
Yeah.
It's really what I do all day, every day. It's my job is to help kids figure out what they want to do next, and then how do you make that happen?
Yeah.
And whether I work at a vocational school, so it's a little different because I'm helping kids get into careers as opposed to go to college, but it's the same thing. How do you make a good decision is really what it comes down to, and good is not my choice.
Yeah.
It's how do you present all the information? How do you look at all the information and make the best choice for your life? And whether we're talking about colleges, whether we're talking about the next man up play, whether we're talking about what to do on a clear, whether we're talking about going into a career, it's how do you take the information that you have available to you and make the best decision possible.
I do want to bring up something that we talked about on the in the previous episode, our episode covering the breakdown. Is you, in my opinion, are the best timeout caller I've ever seen. There'd be times Westwood gets a turnover and there's 4 or 5 bodies on them, and it's kind of like moments where it looks like maybe they might lose the ball or they might go to bounds. Your timing is impeccable. It's also the time in the game too, like Dover Shearborn timeout at the end of the game to be able to maintain that possession and then close that game out after a huge save by Pollock.
Yep.
What goes into your ability to call amazing timeouts? Do you know where the closest ref is? And do you just, if it's close, you're going to call for it? I was interested to hear your perspective on that.
Well, we only get a couple. So
Yeah.
it's not like basketball where you get, 47 timeouts and can, manipulate the game that way. So really, I try to use timeouts to maintain possession. Very rarely do I call a timeout to, change a play or change a formation. I'll do that on the sideline.
Yeah.
With my next midfield line going in, I'm like, hey, I want you guys to run this offense, go do it, or defensively. When I send my defensive middies on, I'll send them in with plays to run. So I really try to use timeouts to maintain possession. I think that's the best way to do it. I'd rather have one in my pocket and have them for the end of the game, so I can get lucky at the end of the DS game, where I did have that one in my pocket and things were getting a little nuts, and call the timeout, calm everybody down, and close the game out. So that's really kind of what it is. It's not really a super deep thought there. Just I like to maintain a possession when I can.
You are I called Timmy Malloy last year the face-off whisperer. You may be the timeout whisperer. It just you call them perfectly, and I'll be sitting watching with the parents. They'll be like, "What?" Because they think it's a warding, or they'll think it's like some kind of call against Westwood, and then when they see that it's a timeout, they go, "Genius!"
I guess that's better than some of the other things parents say.
Oh yes. I also have a question. Special teams is a big part of the game.
Yeah.
And prep for that. And you do a good job you have certain personnel for when you're man up. You have certain personnel for man down. Do you practice being down 2? And then also in terms of the Grafton game, do you practice being down 3? And, how much credit do you give to Westwood when they went down 3 in that game? They killed it, and they did a terrific job, and they kept the ball out of the net. When I'm looking out there and I'm like, I see a lot of, Grafton players. I don't see a lot of Westwood defensive players.
Yep. We, so to answer your question, we don't practice 3 men down ever. We will touch on 2 men down because it does happen once in a while. We don't do it often, maybe once a month. And then, we practice man up, man down, probably 3 times a week. So that, that's kind of where it is. I think actually as the game has evolved over time, the man up situations have become less important because the better teams just don't get penalties. So in the past you could count on 5, 6, 7 minutes of penalties. Now when you're playing top teams, it's 1 or 2. So I think that kind of adjusting my practice schedule to reflect that. I want to practice the things that happen a lot. So man up is one of those things that against good teams, it unfortunately doesn't happen a whole lot. And then on the flip side of that, I don't think that we take a lot of penalties. Of course you're going to have them every once in a while, and you deal with those. But I think in the modern game that the modern game played well, the power plays are less important than they used to be. You still want to, of course, capitalize on those and minimize the other team's chances, but the better teams just don't. They just don't take penalties.
For sure. I do want to bring up Don Varner real quick. We had the great opportunity of covering a lot of games last year, and each game there was like a highlight reel play. Whether it was scoring 20 yards out in the playoffs versus North Attleboro, or if it was at one point there was a game where the goalie had it in his net and he's looking for a clear. Don's in front of him, catches it, makes a quick move, puts it in. How special of a player was he? And how often does a player of his talent come through Westwood?
I've had 2 of those guys in my career. Donnie last year, and then Jake Antonucci was the other one that were just extraordinary players. Their IQs for the game are phenomenal. People talk about Donnie and being able to steal the pass, like you said, from the goalie. You just don't do that by putting your stick in the air. Like he understands what the goalie's trying to do, where he's going with it. His off-ball defense when he was stealing passes was just unbelievable. I used to tell people that when you play us, you have to guard Donnie when you have the ball. You can't just let him be free because he was a threat to score when you had the ball. He's just an unbelievable player, an unbelievable person. The family is great. Brendan played for me for 4 years, and he was absolutely the heart and soul of our offense this year. And he has been for the last couple of years.
He has.
So
and want to bring up them. We talked about Gaffney and Pizzuto. Want to talk about Brendan and Max O'Brien, 2 guys who've been playing with you for a while. Brendan, a very well decorated goal scorer, great leader. assist machine.
Yep.
When he sets up in Gretzky's office behind the net, a lot of them he's finding Max O'Brien in front. Max O'Brien being a guy not afraid to go to those physical areas. He seems like a great leader because he leads by example and really sets the bar for his effort and his positivity, amongst them. What can you say about those two and the contributions that they brought to the program this year?
Sure. I love having multi-sport athletes, and Max was a hockey player, and hockey players are just tough. They understand what needs to happen in the corners, and whether the corner is in the middle of the field or actually in the corner, they get it. So having Max there really was a great asset for us. Fire the ball in there, he'll catch it and finish it. So I really leaned on him for some experience. He was somebody else that's actually started this year at midfield for us as well as one of our midfielders. And, as the season progressed, pushing him down to attack was going to be best for the team. And without hesitation, he jumped in. Probably because he didn't have to run quite so much. A little bit different than Gaff's situation. But again, asking a player to step in as a senior captain and change your position is really a big ask. And I don't want to minimize that. But he grabbed it with both hands and took advantage of it. Brendan's been phenomenal for us for 4 years. One of the first times that he played for us as a freshman was against Medfield, and I'll remember this as a highlight for me, but Brendan scored a goal and absolutely got crushed. And I'm kind of on the sideline like, oh man, I hope he's okay, and what's going to happen? And he jumped up and he's looking out his ear hole and he has to fix his helmet, and he didn't back down. And at that moment, I knew he was going to be a player. He was going to be somebody that solidified that position for us for the next 3.5 years. So having him there and just the steadying influence of having a 4-year player, somebody that distributes the ball. He understood our offense. He probably knew our offense better than the guys that were running it up top, and could tell guys where to go, when to go, how to get there. And when all else failed, just throw the ball to Brendan and he'll take care of it for us. So he's going to be a big loss for us. Yeah. I think he's probably the biggest loss for us in the past couple of years. Yeah. He really is underrated, even though he got a lot of accolades.
Yeah, you mentioned he's underrated. Are there any young guys right now that we haven't mentioned that you're looking at and you're seeing some of those similar qualities in that you're excited to see how they develop over the course of the next 4 years?
Sure. I look at any of the guys that are coming back, the ones you've mentioned, Troy and Roycroft. Dante Martucci's coming back, is going to be a phenomenal player for us. Will Stuhler is our freshman attackman. By the end of the season, he was really coming into his own. So he's going to be great. So I'm really looking forward to those guys and seeing what they can do.
Yeah, it was really cool covering the first goals. And you coach a great program, because when we called Stuhler's first goal and CJ Hancock's first goal, the teammates surround them, and they're so happy for their teammate. But you also see a senior leader who usually will go into the net, grab the ball, and save it. How cool is that experience? You see it every year. Yeah. But especially freshmen, scoring their first goal, scoring them early. It was first two games of the season.
Yeah. No, that's great. It's something we try to celebrate the little things along the way. Yeah. If the only thing you celebrate is a championship, you don't do that often. And in any sport. So we do try to acknowledge and celebrate the little things along the way. And score. You never get another first one. So having that opportunity and having the minute to kind of pat yourself on the back and say, all right, I did that. Yeah. It's kind of a nice moment. So we do. I'm not gonna say we get all of them, but we try to. So we've got a lot of them. So you mentioned CJ. He's going to be fantastic. He's somebody that at the beginning of the season, there was a big step for him from youth lacrosse to varsity lacrosse, and he really understood that by the end of the season. We talked to him a lot about moving his feet when he's throwing his checks. Yeah. And in youth lacrosse, he would stand there and throw a check, and somebody would drop the ball because CJ's mean and throws it hard check. You get to varsity, and all of a sudden guys don't care that you're mean. They're going to run through that. So getting him to understand how to fit into the defense and what he can do, he's somebody that we're watch him in the next couple of years. He's going to be a difference maker for us.
For sure. Yeah, he's going to grow. He is family. He's my sister's son, so I love watching him play. And one of the great highlights was that D twig he had in the Dover Sherborne game. He knocks it down. Harvey picks it up. They go the other way. And so many goals I can remember from this year of the D knocking down that ball. They do such a great job of transitioning. Yeah. And then when you get the skilled players and the quick passes of your Varnerens, your Fredricksons, your Roycrofts, they're burying it.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
do you practice those transitions in
Every day.
And for the most part, when we see a good transition, it's usually an odd man kind of rush where there's only so many D and Westwood has one or two more players. You know, is that typical for those type of, if it's done correctly?
Yeah, it is. You know, it's as again to because I've been doing this for a long time.
Yeah.
I have some experience here. As the game has grown, the level of athleticism, the level of coaching has really improved. So scoring goals 6-on-6 is really hard.
Yeah.
You know, there's all kinds of sophisticated slide packages and defenses, and they change it all the time. So if you can take advantage of those odd man rushes, that's the easiest, best way to get goals. So it's figuring out how do you push transition but don't rush it.
Yeah.
You want to play quickly, but you don't want to play out of control. Guys like Harv, coming up off the floor he's been great. He handles well. He has a great understanding of what he's trying to do. He's somebody who doesn't rush. Sometimes you get guys in they put blinders on, and as soon as they cross midfield and long sticks freak out and they don't know what to do, and he doesn't. He does a great job. Ryan Williams is great at that as well.
Mm-hmm.
He does a really nice job of distributing the ball down to our attackmen and let those guys make the decisions whether or not we're going to push it in transition or settle it down.
For sure. Separate question from lacrosse, more just, Todd Zahurak question is, what's your favorite sport to play or watch that's outside of lacrosse?
I'm a big soccer fan.
Okay.
I played through high school, and I just recently started playing again.
Nice.
And I love watching international soccer. Love English Premier League, stuff like that. So I really enjoy soccer.
And we talk about the non-league schedule. At what point in the year, summer, do you look at the non-league schedule and putting those together for next year? And typically, when is it when you have the schedule for next year kind of ready to go?
So it's all sort of contingent on when the Tri-Valley League releases their schedule. So
Okay.
I'll have, as I go through life, I'll have conversations with different coaches along the way about, hey, do you want to play next year? Let's just try to figure this out. So probably, if we have, 6 non-league games, I probably will reach out to 15 different guys just to see who's interested or who's not, and trying to figure out when it's going to work or when it's not going to work. Because, like I was saying earlier, if, the Chowder Cup doesn't fit into our schedule, then we got to figure something out. And same thing on the other side. The other coaches want to have a good game. But they have to look to see where it will fit in our schedule as well. So to answer your question, it will happen between now and Christmas time is when I'm talking to coaches. I was talking to the Walpole coach a week ago.
Yeah.
So
that was a great game you guys had last year and a huge win versus Walpole.
Yep. Right out of the gate there.
Yeah. And Walpole's always a top team in Division II. They're in Division II still, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I asked you earlier about how close is Westwood to its next TVL title. Which is going to lead me to my next question. How close is Westwood to the Division II state championship? You did have some great upsets versus some really, impressive teams over the years. Situate, and you played a Duxbury team very close last year.
Yep.
So I look at it and I look very close. But how close do you see this team, going into next season as being a team that can go the mile?
I've never done it, so I don't know exactly what we need to do, but I'll also tell you I'm an eternal optimist.
Yes.
And so next year is always the year.
Yeah, it is.
I really think that, we want to be playing in the last weekend of the season every year. That's been our goal for as long as I've been in Westwood.
Yeah.
I think we're as close to it as we've ever been.
Yeah.
Trying to develop some of that depth so that we have, playing in late May and June, you have to contend with the heat and things like that. So you do need to be able to go, 5, 6, 7 midfielders deep, have a fourth defenseman, a fourth attackman. And those are things that I think have prevented us from making a really deep run in the past. We just ran out of guys.
Yeah.
So having that, you look at what we have coming back, and it's. I think we're as close as we've ever been.
And you're going to have depth to add to next year's team too, which is, there's guys who are always knocking on the door, and you're going to have a freshman class that, is hungry and the freshmen before them and the freshmen before them. When I look at Cochran and I look at the Williams, each class ahead of them is showing them the way.
Yeah.
And when I mention that, when it's day one of tryouts, what are you telling these incoming freshmen, to let them know what you want to see for them to earn playing time from you? Is there anything message that you send to them, or do they just go out and ball out and, they get on your radar and you're like, I got to find a way to put this person in?
Yeah, it's a little bit from column A, a little bit from column B.
Yeah.
We talk about, at varsity, I want to win.
Yeah.
JV is, the last time you get to, everybody's going to play and everybody's going to get equal playing time. And I think that that's really important as well. But varsity, I'm playing the best players. I don't care what grade you are. I don't care if you're a captain. I don't care if you're, if you're the best player, you're going to play. And I try to tell the kids that. I don't think freshmen really understand that until they step on the field, and you have to play. And you'll find kids that were very skillful youth players that when they get to high school, they either can't handle the speed or the physicality, and it's a big adjustment. There's a big adjustment between youth and high school, and some kids take a little bit longer to adjust to that than others do. But I'll play the player. I'll play the best players that we have.
Absolutely. And
is that mentality that you express, is that something that you think motivates the guys? And is like that's something that you've seen that over the years going with that kind of method of like, you're going to play the best guy for varsity because you want to win? Do you think that pushes your kids to do better?
I think so. The guys coming back know that the kid behind them understands that if they're good enough, they're going to play. So that motivates the returning players to up their game in the offseason. And it also gives some hope to the new kid that, hey, if I'm good enough, I'm going to see the field. And I've been fortunate enough to have some freshmen that have been really high impact guys. Somebody like Troy Fredrickson. Yep. He came in as a freshman. He scored 5 goals his first game. You got to play him.
Yeah.
And then I've had other guys like somebody like a Matt Cawley who graduated 5 or 6 years ago, who was a long stick midi for us, similar to CJ, where he was a little bit undersized, but at the end of the day, he was the best long stick I had, so I'm going to play him.
Yeah. Guys like Fredrickson and Roycroft, this is an important summer for them. Mm-hmm. Guys who are certainly capable of playing at the next level. What's that process for players as they're going into sophomore, junior year? So Dante Martucci already committed to go play at Assumption.
Yep.
But what's the process for players who want to play at the next level? What's the typical process they go through, and how are you involved in it? I'm sure you talk to coaches, things like that. But if a player wants to explore that, what's the path that they do?
Well, for better or worse, now almost all recruiting is done through clubs.
Okay.
So as time has gone on, I've had less and less interaction with coaches. I still talk to coaches, sure. But not nearly as much as I used to, because it's almost exclusively done through the summer showcases, through summer tournaments, and through the club teams.
Yeah, I remember. So I lived across the Varnerins for like 5-6 years, and I just remember everyone knew how talented Don was. And he was getting looks, but there was no real serious offers. Once he had a great summer, BU calls him up and says, we want this kid. Yep. It's from a summer showcase going into his senior year, which was, pretty cool. So it's and they didn't have that, 10 years ago, no. 15 years ago. I mean, when did that start? And, what are some of the things that you see from your players that play in those, like what are some of the skill sets that you would say are different now because of playing in those type of leagues that may not have been there 15 years ago? Do they have better stick skills? Do they have different programs that are showing them how to do situational plays? I guess what have you seen that has been beneficial from those programs when they come into your program? Probably
the only benefit, really. I'm not a club guy. I'm not a fan of the system. I don't really like
touchy
it.
Subject.
So it's going to be hard for me to be complimentary of it.
Sure.
But the best thing that, from a lacrosse perspective, is these guys have their sticks in their hands more.
Yeah.
And because they're so young, a little bit more experience goes a long way.
Sure.
So having the chance to go out and play in these tournaments and in front of people, and the act of wanting to do that really is what the benefit is. They just have their sticks in their hands more. Yeah. So they get to play more and develop their skills, their game awareness, all of that stuff is accelerated. Yeah. So that's really the benefit of the clubs.
Yep. There was one game I didn't mention that I thought was noteworthy was Hopkinton in Westwood. I was in my Monday bowling league and I had the game on my phone, And Hopkinton got off to a hot start, and Westwood was getting their way back in there. And then what a play by Brendan to knock it loose from the goalie and score to go to overtime. And unfortunately, Hopkinton prevailed. I understand from the game it was a very testy game, competitive game, guys going back and forth, and then to come into Westwood to have a second opportunity, another bite at the apple versus a very competitive team who really took a step forward this year in the TVL. To beat them here in Westwood, in a very physical game, a game where defense was playing terrific, and it was, I think, a low-scoring game for lacrosse.
Yeah.
How great was that game? Especially to have a second chance at them and to come out on top.
Yeah, that was. I think that Hopkinton is a pretty good rival of us.
Yes.
I think that when we look at the league, it's Medfield is probably the top team, and then I think Hopkinton and us are the next sort of tier, and then it goes from there.
Mm-hmm.
So to always beat those guys is a great thing for us. Going into that first game, I think we dramatically underestimated how good they were going to be, and that's shame on me for allowing that to happen. But they really kind of took it to us. We fought hard in that game, but we weren't there.
Yeah.
And then to have like you said, a second bite at the apple, to have them come into our place, we knew it was going to be a good game because it always is.
Yeah.
Good physical, hard fought game, and to be able to come out on top and fairly comfortably. We were up in that game, and I don't think we ever were really threatened by them. Was great. I think it showed the growth of our team. The young guys really developed over the course of the season. They were able to handle the pressure. We put a couple of wrinkles in that we couldn't have done early in the season, that we put them in the day or two before in practice, and then the guys executed them during the game. So it was a good second win for us.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like there was some recency bias. You guys beat Hopkinton pretty handily, the 2 games last year, and kudos to them for the team that they bounced back with this year, but yeah, it was, I thought, one of the more underrated games of the year, and some of the really cool parts of the game. It's not just high goal scoring, things like that, but closing out a game when you're up 2 goals, the art of closing a game is beautiful, and when you have guys like Ryan Pizzuto, who's literally running around for 2 minutes and letting the clock go, what makes for a good closing team? Is it practice, or is it just having guys that just want the ball, get it done?
Yeah, that's something that as the season goes on, we introduce that into practice for the last month of the season, and it's really hard to do because that's an intense 2 minutes. Yeah. And sometimes it's Ryan, here's the ball, and I don't care if you're tired, run.
Yeah.
But it's exhausting.
Yeah.
The defense is throwing heavy checks because they need the ball, and it doesn't matter if they go man down, because if you lose by 2 or 3, who cares? You still lost. So absorbing the heavy checks, a lot of times you have an extra guy running out. The goalie will come out and pick up one of the offensive players. So now it's a constant double team. Yeah. So it is something that we practice, but you can't replace the IQ of somebody like Pizzuto or Brendan, where it's just, here's the ball, Haas.
and their heart rate's 60 beats a minute,
right?
So they're thinking rationally, and they're slowing down the game, and that's what I thought Brendan's leadership brought, was he slowed the game down.
Yeah.
And Kyle Harvey, his leadership, when he gets a turnover and he crosses the 50, he doesn't panic. He slows it down. Every now and then he'll run around the net, set it up, and then he'll go back, and it's great leadership to have.
Yeah.
I got a competitive question for you. Do you hate losing, or do you love winning?
Yes. The losses will eat at me.
Yes.
Where the wins, the nature of the beast is the wins is you win, you pat yourself on the back on the bus ride home, and then it's on to Cleveland or Cincinnati or whatever that quote is.
Yeah.
So I do like to reflect at the end of the season, and look at the wins, because I think the wins really get kind of pushed aside very quickly. Something like the Norwell win. It's early in the season, it happened, it was great, and then 2 days later we're playing again, and you're worried about the next game, and you kind of forget about that game.
Yeah.
So looking back, I think the wins are better later.
Yes.
Where the losses will eat at you, immediately.
Yeah, it keeps away the complacency.
Yeah.
Keeps in the back of your mind, we can't take our foot off the gas,
Right.
But those are always, good questions, because, different sports, different perspectives, all of that, both, there's really no right or wrong answer, it's different kind of, different for everyone in every sport. But, we appreciate you coming on, Coach. Great to get, answers to questions of understanding you as, a coach, your style, your team. I guess, the last question would be, what can we look for in next year's team? What are you expecting with next year's team? Do you have any insight into players that might be coming up to join the team, the incoming class? And ultimately, what is the growth trajectory that you think is possible for next year's team when it comes to a TVL title, making a run in the playoffs? What do you think the ceiling is for next year?
Yeah, so for next year, I was actually just talking to a couple of the returning players about this and trying to adjust our practice schedule so that we are fresh for the end of the season.
Yeah.
Nobody cares if you win in March and April.
Yeah.
Those are nice and okay, good.
Yeah.
But the ones that really matter are late May and June. So I think we're kind of looking at how to adapt ourselves as a coaching staff and as a leadership group with the players to really be sure that we're playing our best lacrosse at the end of the season. I'm super excited for Sam Cochran.
Yeah.
I think that he is on the verge of a breakout year. He had moments this year where he was untouchable.
Yeah.
So he's somebody that I have penciled in as somebody who's going to take a huge leap next year. And then of course all the names that we've already talked about. Those guys are they're on the summer circuit. They're getting better as we go on here. Jaden's going to be back between the pipes for the second season. I think that there's as much growth as we saw last year with Jaden coming in with a year of experience under his belt is going to be just make him that much better. And he's still young, so he's going to be humble enough to understand that there's as good as he is, there's still a lot of growth to happen. So I'm really excited about next year.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You are making history. You are our first guest
there
on
we
our
go.
second episode of the Wolverine Report. Folks, we appreciate you tuning in. Looking forward to seeing you for future episodes. And like we said previously, want to bring many guests possible on here, make it as interactive as possible, and really bring some great content to you. So thanks again for tuning in and looking forward to seeing you on the next one.